The prices are higher. The summers are hotter. The wind is stronger, the wage weaker, and fires kindle more easily. Tornadoes rove like avenging angels through the cities on the plain. Something has changed. Plagues burn deep in the blood. Every other year, a great flood descends, jeweled with corpses, to turn the soil of another punished nation. Behind us lies the great Carboniferous bonfire of human history. Ahead, a dimming shadow cast by our own bodies, caught and thrashing the gyre. Anyone can sense that something is very wrong, that an evil has seeped into the very soil of society, and everyone knows that the powers and principalities of this world are to blame. Yet we all also feel powerless to enact any sort of retribution. As individuals, we see no way to exert any influence over the course of events and must simply watch as they wash over us. We find ourselves disarmed and alone, faced with a dark future in which shivering horrors stalk just beyond the border of our sight, dragged inexorably forward as the chains rattle and sounds of torment echoes back from the world to come. That's not Edgar Allan Poe. That is one of my favorite modern day theoreticians, Phil Neel. He is a communist geographer based at the University of Washington, I believe. He also is an author of books such as Hinterland. You had my channel open and you got jump scared. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for scaring you. But yeah, read Phil Neel, read Hinterland. He's done quite a bit of social investigation and class analysis in the hinterland. And I really love when communist academics do that. So, yeah, I'm definitely a stan. But this is an excerpt, well, the beginning paragraph of his recently released article that came out on September 6th, 2025, The Theory of the Party. And in it, he takes the modern day radical left to task for failing to, in DSA jargon, meet the moment. There is a link in the chat, and I highly recommend that you all read it. So, delving into this, I took some pretty key takeaways that I think will help with our organizing in DSA and various other formations. So Neel goes on to talk about our material reality in which we live and why various groups are failing to meet the moment. So he has extracted some key principles like why does the left suck? Why do we have all of these problems? So let's go back to our past for a little bit. Neel mentions that the parties of the past, the BPP, the old CPUSA before the revisionist reformist turn, the IWW, all of the groups that we study, that we read about, that we admire, and that we try to LARP and recreate, where they were smashed. They were all melted down in the alembic of repression in Neel's particularly poetic language. The parties of the past were all melted down in the alembic of repression. The great minds were broken. Betrayal followed betrayal. Of course, as a Maoist, I would not like. Okay, so a key point of Maoist philosophy is that if something fucked up happens, okay, if your party ends up crushed, if it ends up repressed, driven into exile, internal contradictions allow for external contradictions to become effective, right? So when we talk about the collapse of the Black Panther Party, yes, the feds, J. Edgar Hoover, played a role, but what allowed J. Edgar Hoover to do these horrible things and help contribute to the downfall of the Black Panther Party? Black Panther Party. Like the Bolsheviks, they also faced repression. Okay, you had the Okhrana, you had provocateurs, you had all types of shitty people that tried to wreck the Bolshevik Party. But the Bolshevik Party, like the Black Panther Party, was rooted in the masses. But the difference, I think, between the Bolsheviks and the Black Panther Party was that the Black Panther Party did not have the iron discipline that Stalin spoke of. So when we talk about democratic centralism, when we talk about the need for revolutionary discipline, we're not just saying this because we want to build a cult. We're saying this because discipline helps us not necessarily avoid repression, because you talk of avoiding repression when you're trying to overthrow and topple the most dangerous regime in human history. It's you can't do that. So when we talk about how to avoid, well, mitigate the repression that we're going to face, because if we do our job as communists, we're going to face repression, okay? We're going to face repression. We're going to have to deal with all this shit. We're going to die. We're going to be in prison. We're going to be driven into exile. All types of horrible shit are going to happen to us. We're going to have to deal with provocators, snitches, snakes, rats, moles, mice, all types of things like that. So we have to steel ourselves. The brave were crushed and the cowards fled. The great minds were broken. Only the dead remained pure in their silence. I really, really like this part because communism is, well, American communism in the imperial core is obsessed with the dead. We're always talking about our martyrs. Our martyrs are immortal. Okay, we cannot make revolution with martyrs alone. Okay, we cannot make revolution with martyrs alone. We actually have to have people who are alive to carry through the victory to the end. Otherwise, it's not gonna work. The article was interesting. You haven't finished it though. You should check out the works of Ellen Meikson's Wood. I'm reading a social history of Western political thought right now. Okay, I will definitely try to add that to the giant monstrous stack of books I have beside me. As a result, we now find that any inquiry into the question of organization is immediately weighed down both by the overabundance of too distant history, too easily rendered into overwrought fan fictions, and by the lack of any living institutions carrying on the incendiary spirit of the partisan project. I really like how Phil gets in everybody's ass here. Like yeah, the Bolsheviks were the product of the unique contradictions and processes that existed in the Russian Empire. Yeah, so yeah, I love Iron Felix. I love Kamo. I love Stalin, even though I have many severe critiques of him. I love Mao. I love all of our great teachers. But the thing is, like, they're dead. Mao is literally a mummy in Tiananmen Square. Stalin is literally buried in the necropolis in the Kremlin. Lenin is a wire frame held up by bones and plastic. The only thing left of Lenin's physical form is probably a few bits of rotten flesh. So yeah, we should study. We should learn from our past, but we should also try to develop towards the future. There has never been a communist revolution in the imperial core for a variety of reasons. So we are building almost entirely, not entirely, but almost entirely from scratch. And we have to keep that in mind. Otherwise, we are going to make many mistakes because we're trying to LARP the past. We cannot do that. So he goes on to criticize formations like FTP, which I was a proud member of, uh, the Red Guards, the Committee for the Reconstitution of the American Communist Party or some shit. No, the Committee for the Reconstitution of the Communist Party of the United States. Yes, it's a mouthful. Maoists are not much for brevity. So he goes on to mention that the real question is instead entirely different. As anyone who has participated in any of the major rebellions of the past 15 years can tell you, there is never any shortage of such theorists of organization or even miniature melted formations, shade thrown, composed of correct-minded cadre operating in the midst of the revolt. So again, like, where do correct ideas come from? They're not innate in the mind. They don't drop from the sky. They don't pour from the pages of an old book. Correct ideas come from social practice and the application of our social practice. The reading of our social practice through what we know about Marxist Leninist Maoist theory and revolutionary history. So theory and practice complement each other. But as Fred Hampton said, theory without practice ain't shit. So practice is primary. Where does theory even come from? Theory comes from generations, hundreds of years of social practice. That's how we know that we cannot reform away capitalism and imperialism. That's how we know that there is no such thing as a peaceful revolution. When Marx was talking, when Marx was writing, he was not just talking out of his ass, okay? He was actually, he had studied. He spent years studying. And through this study, he came to um, universal conclusions. How do we know that these conclusions are universal? We can't just go around saying things are universal, okay? We do not have great man theory. We do not do that. We don't apply feedback loops, okay? And we're setting ourselves up for failure by practicing, as the comrade says here, great man theory. There's no such thing as a great man. And the funny thing is that, like, it's not just a Maoist, it's not just an ML thing. Like, you literally have Bernie Sanders and AOC being treated as the second coming of Lenin and Krupskaya, respectfully. So, yeah, anything is subject to criticism. Marxism, Leninism, Maoism is about the ruthless criticism of everything that exists. When we say ruthless criticism, we mean, like, we don't mean be an asshole, be a dick to everybody. What ruthless criticism means that we hold no delusions when we make our criticism or our analysis. And yes, it's going to hurt some people's feelings, but we do not set out to hurt people's feelings. So why then does nobody seem to be interested in these coherent political programs that these small, tiny, miniature, infinitesimally small operations, get ups, setups are carrying out? The reason is usually quite simple. They're not offering anything at all other than the word organization itself, repeated ad infinitum. Though they themselves are convinced otherwise, such individuals and their so called organizations usually provide no concrete tactical experience or strategic knowledge, and are therefore incapable of pushing the revolt beyond its limits and building substantial forms of proletarian power. For this reason, they are quickly outmaneuvered by the collective intelligence of the rebellion itself. They're also quickly outmaneuvered by the state. Even in the rare cases where they do have something to offer, they fail to organize themselves effectively enough to convince anyone to care what they have to say in the first place. In other words, they have no means of interfacing with or engaging with the wider rebellion. Truth nuke. So he goes on to criticize the limits of rebellions themselves. Like when people see shit going on in the streets, like, oh my God, the revolution is here. No, the revolution is not here. Okay? The revolution is not here. Just because you see a cop car on fire, that does not mean that the revolution has come. So, rebellions, they are important. Rebellions can turn into revolutions um, if the right ingredients are there. But we cannot see a revolution. First of all, what is a revolution? A revolution is not just burning a cop car or a Waymo up in the streets. Okay, when people get mad, they burn shit up. That's common sense. Even the cops know that. A revolution is the violent overthrow of one entire class, of one old system by another. Okay? What did our teacher, George Jackson, say about revolution? Well, he draws on Lenin, Fanon, and Che Guevara. All in their particular fashion postulate that before a revolution could take place, all other forms of redress must have been exhausted, clearly exhausted. Electoral processes must have broken down. The confidence of the electorate in any of the old forms completely must be shattered. Confidence in the ability of the old system to honestly organize any effort of public life must be shaken to the core. Years and years ago, it may have been an acceptable tactic to organize a people's ticket of solid worker and revolutionary credentials and arm it with an ideal platform, only to be defeated by if I recall correctly, Jackson goes on to say, a demonstrably inferior scum-swilling pig. Yes, our elders did have a gift for rhetoric. Our elders had riz. So the we that doesn't exist, we get organized. So if we have to talk like, who is we? That's the massive lack. Who the fuck is we? So who are our friends? Who are our enemies? Our enemies are, simply put, anybody who has beef with us. Our friends are anybody who has beef, like tangible material, like world shaking beef with the people that are fucking us over. The we is international. The we is everybody that can be organized. But on the other hand, the left is also so caught up on squabbling and fighting and splitting amongst each other. Like this happens in every movement: the Palestinian Solidarity Movement, labor movement, the Black Liberation Movement. Like people do not like. I've been called both an anti-Semite and a Zionist in the same conversation. So yeah, the left needs to get its shit together, and it needs to stop like acting as if moral posturing is enough to topple this bloody fucking empire. And it comes out of, I think, our impotence. It comes out of our weakness. Like when you have a movement that is more focused on cannibalizing itself than actually winning, than actually seizing and conquering power, than actually stopping the genocide in Gaza, than actually liberating black people, then of course it's going to pick on the weakest link, pick on people who are allies, pick on people who are comrades. You cannot do that. You cannot have a movement that is continuously and constantly fighting itself. That is no movement. That is a collection of high school sects. So it feels like Neel goes on to say, in reality, an organization emerges through the practical overcoming of material limits, trailing its intellectual, aesthetic, and ethical commitments behind. In other words, people do not join organizations, support them, or adopt their political positions, symbology, and general dispositions en masse because they agree with them. They do so because these organizations exhibit competency and strength of spirit and strength of will, I would also add. So basically, why do people follow you? Why do people follow you? Because you have something that what already exists lacks. Okay? You meet something, you meet the moment, to use DSA speak. So, why did people follow the Black Panther Party? Was it because they had read the 10-point program? Was it because all of these lumpen in Oakland and Berkeley and San Francisco loved Mao? No. Loving Mao came later. They loved the Black Panther Party because here, for the very first time in the collective memory of the New African proletariat and lumpen proletariat of the 1960s, you had strong comrades who were willing to face down the police with weapons in hand. The Black Panther Party provided something entirely new. The left today that tries to imitate the Black Panther Party, it's trying to reinvent the wheel. People already know who the Panthers were. People also know that the Panthers were crushed, guns and all. So we have to provide something new. We have to meet the moment. We have to, like Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton and the other elders did, we have to sit down around the kitchen table and we have to talk about where we are, what we can do about it, what the people want and need. That's what every DSA chapter should be doing. That's what every affinity group should be doing. We have to go back to the drawing board. We have to go back to the drawing board, keeping in mind that we already have some semblance of a blueprint. But we have to go back to the drawing board and we have to integrate ourselves with the deepest masses of the people. The 10-point program represented the demands, the will, the collective will of the New African proletariat in the year 1966 at Oakland, California. We have to develop a program that comes out of the collective struggles of the past 20 years. Otherwise, nobody's going to pick it up. And Neel is also echoing Kilcullen here, David Kilcullen. I've mentioned him before, I believe, but he's the author of Out of the Mountains. And he's probably my favorite modern day bourgeois military theoretician. And you should definitely read him, yes. People join organizations and engage with them because they provide stability and provide a vacuum. And fill a vacuum. So when the enemy appears to abdicate a trench of combat, which they really do not do, we're competing for competitive control over an open field of conflict, the minds of the masses. That's what happens in a rebellion. We would call it applying the mass line. How do we win over the intermediate? Because the enemy is also struggling and working to win over the intermediate. So, yeah. So how can DSA fill a vacuum? People have always asked, why does DSA have this blackness problem? Why does DSA not have enough black people? Because DSA historically has not met the moment in regards to the black working class. So we can only fill that black vacuum. We can only fill that vacuum if we're serious about it. Otherwise, of course, we're going to continue to go through this shit over and over and over again. We have to provide concrete leadership and action. So, what is a sigil? As a Game of Thrones fan, I really, really appreciate how he used the term sigil. So, sigil is something that draws a preliminary form of collective subjectivity up from the surging tide of history. A sigil is basically a symbol. And it's not just like, for example, in France, when you think of the rebellions in France earlier this decade, think of the yellow vests, yeah. When you think of the Mike Brown uprising, you think of Robertson holding a bag of Red Hot Riplets, which are very good, by the way. Come to St. Louis, you get addicted to our food. A bag of Red Hot Riplets in one hand and a tear gas canister in another. Yeah. So these are sigils, these are symbols. When you think of the Palestinian Solidarity Movement, when you think of the Student Intifada, you think of Hins Hall. These are all sigils. These are things that help unite the masses. These are a package of political sentiments and political conflicts associated with a certain act, a certain thing that you wear, etc. There's a reason why celebrities are running around wearing keffiyeh now while not being able to point to Palestine on a map because it's a sigil. They want to align themselves somewhat with the Palestinian resistance, even if they don't support the Palestinian resistance. These are powerful things. We have to build them up. In the most rudimentary form, sigils operate at the aesthetic level, things like the yellow vest or the yellow helmet from the struggles of the late 2010s. In their more elaborate form, they encompass certain tactical practices or organizational dispositions as transmitted through a name and a package of minimal practices. For example, workplace councils, neighborhood resistance committees, public square occupations, etc. The sigil renders tactics into broadly replicable forms and offers a minimal passage through which the uninitiated, i.e., that section of the population normally deemed apolitical, are able to enter into the moment of rupture. So, subsistence struggles. Okay, when you think of subsistence struggles, you think what? Subsistence farming. Some guy in a mountain in Uganda trying to eke out a living from growing cassava, right? Okay, pretty much all the struggles in the global north are subsistence struggles. Okay, so your boss fires your colleague for trying to organize, so you do a march on the boss. That's a subsistence struggle. Okay, and a lot of people think that ultra leftists, people like me or Phil Neel, are incapable of engaging in these struggles. No, our constant position is that when we engage in these struggles, we have to have a broader project in mind. We cannot just go from strike to strike to strike. Then the unions put us all back to work, or they fire the killer cop and he goes to jail for 3 or 4 years, only to be pardoned by scum swilling, demonstrably inferior pigs like Trump. Those are subsistence struggles. And there is such a thing as militant reformism. Hell, there's even such a thing as armed reformism. We have to do better. Communists must define and confront subsistence struggles as a limit to be overcome, since the demands and grievances expressed by such struggles are imposed interests emanating from identities that are ultimately constructed by capital, as is visible in racist opposition, racist proletarian opposition, no, racist working class opposition. We do not give the term proletariat to racists. To migrant labor, for example, doing nothing but defending material well-being, i.e., fighting for real gains for the working class, ultimately strips a communist organization of its fidelity to the larger communist project. The incendiary pulse of any given struggle is bled out through the 1,000 small cuts of compromise. In fact, victory in any given subsistence struggle is often itself a defeat. Very dialectical analysis. The murdering cop is sent to trial, perhaps even found guilty. The wage increase is won. The environmentally destructive development project is canceled. The controversial law is retracted. The president steps down and power passes to the transitional government. By far, the best way to defeat a communist movement is not through armed repression. It's for the party of order to concede real gains within subsistence struggles and then consolidate these gains under its own banner. Broadly defined, subsistence struggles are those focused on concrete issues of survival under capitalism. So if the enemy keeps us in survival mode, if the enemy keeps us like constantly, if the enemy keeps us constantly like shuffling from survival struggle to survival struggle, then we're not going to have time to think of the big picture. That is exactly what the enemy wants, because the enemy is well fed. The enemy is well prepared. They can think 300, 400, 500 years into the future. Whereas they want to keep us thinking tomorrow. What can we do tomorrow? So they want to keep us thinking tactically while they're thinking strategically. We cannot cede the field of strategy to the enemy. Although these operate along multiple dimensions, they may be loosely divided into struggles over the terms of subsistence and struggles over the imposition of these terms on the population. The former tend to focus on relatively narrow distributional issues of access to social resources. The rent is too fucking high. We need food. Inflation is out of control. That's distributional. While the latter tend to focus on the broader issues of survival and dignity that arise through the apportioning of these resources. The first category, struggles over the terms of subsistence, is almost always centered in some way on the price level. These can be further subdivided into struggles over general commodity prices, the cost of living, especially rent, struggles over the price of labor power, wages, pensions, and other employment benefits, or struggles over the pricing of services and resources funneled through the state, such as welfare infrastructure, and education. Institutional differences between localities ensure that certain issues, such as healthcare, may lay on one side or the other or span both. Sudden price spikes or reapportionments of social goods can certainly trigger large-scale protests, and long-run inflation and corruption can increase the frequency of subsistence struggles. However, as a rule, these struggles are more easily recuperated into the policy sphere, and they only take on a radical edge in extreme conditions or when partisan organizations exist to push them in this direction. This is why building up partisan organizations is so important. But I'm not going to read all of Phil Neal's article. I'm not a plagiarist, but yeah, you should definitely read it. And if you have an analysis, talk about it. I will literally invite you onto my stream to talk about what you think about this article. It's that important. Y'all remember when Sherman made Georgia howl? Well, my favorite bourgeois militarist video channel, YouTube channel, Kings and Generals, has released a video on Sherman's march. So let's see how exactly our two drunk, depressed Union Army generals made Georgia howl. I will be right back.
By 1864, the Confederacy was clearly dying. Losing Chattanooga had cut the southern capital of Richmond off from everything west of the Appalachian Mountains. Its armies were ragged, hungry, and desertion was rising. The economy was collapsing, and civilians were starving. However, the only thing that mattered was the US presidential election on November 8th. If the South kept fighting and Abraham Lincoln wasn't re-elected, then a diplomatic settlement was still possible. However, William Tecumseh Sherman had no intention of leaving the war up to the voters. Welcome to our latest video on the American Civil War, in which we will cover the Union Army's decisive invasion of Georgia and Sherman's infamous and destructive march to the sea. Every week, we release 3 new exclusive videos for our members and patrons: the Pacific War, the Eastern Front of World War II Prelude, and many other series, including the War of Spanish Succession, Punic Wars, Iberian Reconquista, Russian Revolution and Civil War, North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, and much more. It has been long overdue, but we have finally created a YouTube channel exclusively for our Kings and Generals podcasts. Please go and check out Cues from Chattanooga. Sherman finally returned to Vicksburg to formally take command of his army in January. Meanwhile, Grant intended to take the department's armies to Atlanta. While technically outside his department, Atlanta wasn't in anyone else's jurisdiction. Moreover, Lincoln never objected to vigorous prosecution of the war, and would probably be in favor of a campaign on the wealthy southern city. However, before the Union armies could march on Atlanta, their rear needed to be secured. After Jackson was destroyed during the Vicksburg campaign, the Mississippi state government relocated to Meridian, which housed an arsenal and all the surviving regional railway links. Meridian was defended by 10,000 troops near Morton under Leonidas Polk. The incompetent Polk wasn't a threat, but Sherman needed practice commanding an army. Sherman marched from Vicksburg on February 3, 1864, with 20,000 men. He simultaneously ordered his 7,000 cavalry to advance from Memphis, chase Nathan Forrest's cavalry off, then rendezvous with Sherman in Meridian. His remaining troops feinted in several directions, while his naval transports maneuvered near Mobile to draw attention away from Meridian. These deceptions successfully convinced Polk that Sherman's target was Mobile. Rather than hold Morton, he pulled back to Meridian, intending to hit Sherman's rear once he turned towards Mobile. Consequently, he was shocked when Sherman came after him and fled into Alabama without a fight. Although Forrest's aggressive attack drove off the superior Union cavalry, attacks on the other feints failed. Consequently, Sherman occupied Meridian unopposed on February 14th. After destroying everything of military value and freeing Union prisoners, Sherman marched back to Vicksburg on February 20th, where an unexpected promotion was awaiting. Grant had been informed that he'd soon be made General-in-Chief and promoted to Lieutenant General, the US Army's first since George Washington. He'd therefore need to leave the West for the East. Accordingly, he wanted his friend to bring his army to Chattanooga, then take over the Western Department. When Grant formally received his promotion on March 9, 1864, President Lincoln was in a particularly depressive mood. Certain that he'd lose re-election, he wanted Grant to either win the war outright before November, thereby ensuring his re-election, or ensure that it could be won before a peace candidate took office in March. Grant complied with his signature strategic directness. At this late stage in the war, the only strategic unconquered Confederate territories were the cities of Mobile, Richmond, and Atlanta. If those cities were taken, then the Confederacy would eventually wither and die. However, destroying the Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of Tennessee would win the war outright. Therefore, George Meade and the Army of the Potomac would engage Robert E. Lee, using Richmond to pin him in place and destroy him. Sherman would do the same to the Army of Tennessee by launching an assault on Atlanta. Meanwhile, all other commands would launch supplemental attacks to divert and overwhelm Confederate resources. Each department had discretion for how to complete its objectives, but all movements had to begin between May 1st and 14th. Grant would finally launch the simultaneous offensive McClellan talked up back in 1861. Grant provided Sherman with his plans for capturing Atlanta, after which the two were in constant telegraph contact to coordinate their efforts. Grant took Burnside and the 9th Corps back east. Hooker and his troops, having been reorganized into the 20th Corps, would stay behind. Sherman would have 7 infantry corps and 4 cavalry divisions across 3 armies to conquer Atlanta. The only viable supply line for both sides through the mountains of northern Georgia was the Western and Atlantic Railroad. Advancing along these routes meant contending with Confederate defenses in the front, and cavalry raids against the rail network back to the supply hub in Nashville. Because of these perils, Grant had envisioned a swift confrontation with the Army of Tennessee in northern Georgia from multiple fronts as quickly as possible. However, Sherman knew that he'd have difficulty replacing losses due to his long and easily disrupted supply lines. Therefore, he decided to take a page out of Rosecrans's book. Rather than fight directly, Sherman would maneuver his enemy into defeat. While there was only one railway through the mountains, the numerous roads, of highly variable quality, meant that a route past an enemy always existed. Therefore, he'd use his 3 armies to pin down, flank, and envelop his opponent as he inexorably marched to Atlanta. The Confederate general opposing Sherman's advance was Joseph Johnston. Ever since taking direct command from Braxton Bragg in December, Johnston had been working tirelessly to put the broken Army of Tennessee back together, and had mostly succeeded. While morale never recovered to pre-Chickamauga levels, he had restored his 40,000 soldiers' will to fight, and found them the best weapons and food available. Polk joined him in late March, and another 15,000 would arrive during May from other Alabama garrisons. With these weary but able soldiers, Johnston had to find a way to halt Sherman's 120,000-strong departmental juggernaut. Richmond wanted Johnston to fight like Lee and take the offensive against Sherman, but Johnston refused. He knew his generals weren't capable of executing such deceptive.
I'm back from my streamer union mandated smoke break.
Complicated and bold offensive maneuvers. Even if they could, Sherman was too tenacious to retreat, too smart to be fooled, and had too many troops to destroy. Moreover, Johnston couldn't replace his losses, making open battle exceedingly risky. However, northern Georgia was a natural fortress, so Johnston didn't have to defeat Sherman outright to win the campaign. Johnston was aware of northern war weariness, and that the peace Democrats were
Hello, Alexandria Rose, I'm sorry.
Gaining strength. If he could deny Sherman a significant victory before November 8th, the ballot box could save the Confederacy. Therefore, he would play for time.
Is this armed electoralism?
To that end, Johnston built a series of fortifications between Chickamauga Creek and Atlanta, planning to hold each position as long as possible.
Why didn't he just eat Sherman up with guerrilla warfare? Oh, because it was dishonorable, and Southern Gemmen don't fight like Indians.
Before falling back. The hope was that Sherman would assault his positions, grinding his armies to death. If not, between natural attrition and constant skirmishing, he would bleed Sherman dry. To accelerate the process, Johnston identified a number of sites where Sherman's columns would naturally isolate themselves, and planned ambushes.
So he knew a little bit of ball.
Union Army descended upon Georgia, Johnston's inferior Confederate defense force was bolstered by some unusual aid. The 3-year contracts of the Union Army's veteran 1861 volunteers were starting to expire. The Confederate Congress had indefinitely extended all Confederate enlistments, but the U.S. Congress had not. This meant that Sherman's best men were trickling away. While over half would be returning after furloughs and new recruits would make up the lost numbers, Sherman's department would have problems with total manpower and soldier quality between June and September. There was also bound to be organizational chaos from units leaving and being replaced. While a major inconvenience, Johnston's manpower deficiencies prevented him from exploiting Sherman's weakness.
Another thing about the Confederate Army was that it was like, most of these people were draftees. Most of these people didn't even know what they were fighting for. Yes, he was bald as fuck. He was a middle-aged white man. Of course, I'm a 31-year-old black man, and I'm also bald as fuck, so yeah. Jeans is jeans, boss. But, yeah, the Confederate Army was driven, the rank-and-file Confederate Army was basically like, it was a bunch of conscripts from shitty subsistence farms in like northern Georgia and other such far-flung places. They didn't really have any stake in this fight. They were also incredibly racist. Like, these were not paragons of the international proletariat or anything, but there were definitely contradictions. There were definitely a lot of contradictions that you basically had a bunch of like old plantation families that provided most of the officer corps, but like the rank and file, the dudes that were actually out there in the shit, they were by and large poor as fuck. But that does not make them allies to the masses of black people, though. But hey, you should be able to take advantage of your enemy's contradictions. Something to remember for our future struggles. Yes. Yeah. But anyways, I will leave Kings and Generals alone. Let's play some Tropico. I haven't played it in a while. Waiter, more dead proletarians. You know, the thing with left comms is that I don't know what to say about them. Like, they're very incoherent. Like the OG left comms, they like, you at least knew where they stood. But these guys, I don't fucking it's just spite. It's like those first world weird third worldist types. Yeah. I don't know. Everybody has the right to be stupid, I guess, but you do not have the right to impose your stupidity on everybody else. What, man? Also, I'm going to be back later to talk with a Nepalese comrade of mine I've known for years. We're going to be talking about the struggle. Apparently, shit has popped off in some type of way in Nepal. So we're going to be talking about why this is the case. But yeah, tune in at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Your Tropicans will always compare your happiness to that of their Caribbean neighbors, fucking pocket watchers. Ooh, a shithole. Lovely. Oh. And which of the 90 communist parties of Nepal is that comrade in? He lives in the United States. He is not he does not live in Nepal. Apparently, the Nepalese government has like banned all social media. So yeah, that's what's going on over there, and that's what people. You've never played Tropico? You should. It's really fun. Oop. But yeah, take care of your coffee. Coffee is essential. Figured I would play something besides Arma. I'm pretty sure y'all are tired of that. I never get tired of Arma. My comrade got me hooked on that, and there was a pretty dope update. All right, let's get our roads together because Americans simply must have our roads. As with Tropicans, we're fucking dosing the Tropicans with roads, getting them hooked on roads. Americanization of the Lovely Caribbean island of Tropico. You played Tropico 3 when it first came out, and being that I was only 14 when the game came out, I could never understand why the U.S. always wanted to invade me. One more lane, bro. Stay in your lane. All right, let's start destroying the environment, cutting down all the trees. We're replanting them, of course. We're not that evil. No, we don't need another construction office. Thing is, like, you're going to be tempted to overbuild in this game. Do not, because for one, you're not going to have enough people to run these buildings, and two, you're going to spend up all your money. So yeah, don't do that. Easy rookie mistake. What are we growing? Tobacco. Yes, let's give the Yankees lung cancer. You watched the foreign man video the other day that was really eye opening to like how in the Bahamas the infrastructure is built to serve tourists. Yeah, that's what the song "Who Let the Dogs Out" is about. The tourists are the dogs. All right, let's have a couple of ranches. Tropicans are entitled to beef. Let's feed the people, shall we? And of course, we're not going to have our people living in shacks, so let's build them bunkhouses, which are barely a step above shacks, but hey, it's better than sleeping in a contraption made out of tar paper and scrap metal. Also, tomorrow I'm going to be talking with a former NCC comrade in YDSA. Well, he's actually aged out of YDSA, but and we're going to be talking about the YDSA convention and the possible new era that our comrades in YDSA will be in. So, got a lot of good stuff planned for you, comrades. Because we're all about the movement here. You guys like coconuts? Let's build another plantation to stick the colonizers on. Yankees are going to be growing corn as reparations. But yeah, do not overbuild in the first steps of your game. You will going to pay for it later. Pirates. Sure. Yeah, stick you fuckers over there. Let y'all go raid. DSA actually, if I recall correctly, its platform has support for reparations included. Did not quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure we do. Get rid of that ranch. I want smelly animals right behind my presidential palace. You should read the platform of the organization that you're in. I've read it, I just don't have it memorized. I'm a horrible communist. Let's look at some demographics. Okay, 136 of my citizens are unemployed. So then we are going to send you all to the mines. Okay, we've got coal, we've got iron. That means steel. If I find some nickel, then we will have weapons production. Ooh. Want to keep your mines away from your farms so that they do not get rat fucked with pollution. Because who wants to eat coal and iron contaminated corn or smoke coal and iron contaminated tobacco? Nobody. What's wrong? She did throw up. You would smoke coal laced cigarettes. You are Serbian and are thus not right in the head. Normal people who are not Serbian do not want to smoke coal laced cigarettes. I was inoculated against the Serbs by the 35,000 Bosnians in St. Louis. It's nothing personal. I just received Bosnian brainwashing and propaganda. Their food has too much riz. Yeah, well. You're you were agitated against Americans by 10 tons of depleted uranium we dropped on you. I didn't do that. I think war in during the war in Yugoslavia, I was what, like 3, 4, late 90s? Yeah, I was a toddler. Toddler Redguard was so evil he dropped depleted uranium on Yugoslavia. Somebody told me at DSA convention that like there are people who have been listening to me since middle school, and that was wild to me. Like when I was in middle school, the fucking Iraq War was going on. Take it out on Bill Clinton, not me. Oh, they mean to do that. Where am I going to put a fisherman's wharf, lady? These are shallows. There's no fucking fish. Oh, there are fucking fish. How am I going to get over there? You're gonna have to wait. I'm sorry. I have to keep the imperialists happy. I can build a lumber mill though. Bill Clinton is not my father. All right, knocking down the unemployment and the homelessness. I still love how they gave DSA an island to rule. Wait, what? What was Hillary Clinton's motivation for bombing Serbia? Was she like part of the Bosnian mob or something? Is her real name Hillary Hucic? It's kind of like Eric Adams being like beloved of the Balkan population. Like the Albanians love that dude. We cannot produce any fish because we do not have any. I'm sorry. Also, as a socialist, you are going to be you want to be inclined to pass free housing in this game early on. Don't do that unless you want to bankrupt your country like immediately. Yes, that is a dingite line, but also this is a dingite video game. What good is a communist island if it doesn't have a newspaper? Not shit. You want to stack up all your little bunkhouses around a newspaper so your people get properly propagandized. Extend my mandate. All right, now let's start building up our military capability. Yes. What good is an island that seeks independence if it cannot claim such through force of arms? Let's build a few forts, defend our coast. All right, only 20 unemployed people and only 30 homeless people. Of course, as a socialist, I knew that even one homeless person is too much. There will be no homeless people in Tropico. There are some lovely country houses. That should knock it down a peg or two. And of course, we're industrializing early. We have three factories. We will not be dependent on the Americans or the Soviets for industrial production. We're churning out planks. Yes, of course, the imperialists want me to build a fucking dungeon. For what purpose? I do not know. Maybe to put them in. Dungeon offers tailor-made re-education of offenders in a secure, dank facility amply equipped with the latest in medieval enhanced interrogation techniques. We stretching motherfuckers out on the rack. Yes, I built a hotel for the imperialists. I've got to pull a sneaky on them. Think you're coming for a nice, lovely vacation in a colony? Nope. Rack, motherfucker. All right. Zero unemployed people. We got zero unemployment on a crummy Caribbean island before we got GTA 6. Huh. Build a chapel? Yeah, I can do that. See, I can do that. I cannot get fish where there aren't any. You gotta cater to the revolutionaries so they will support and eventually wage a struggle for independence. And bring in more revolutionaries. There you go. Yeah, we're approaching zero homelessness. Let's build some parks. Fully stocked. Exporting leather made not from human flesh. Right. Economy's pretty decent. Always good to start off independence with a strong foundation so that you are not dependent. So you are not dependent on foreign aid. All right, so we're going to be independent pretty soon. I'm a Maoist. I'm always down for looting. We bought our independence. I was not willing to sacrifice the blood and sweat of my people. We could have won, but yeah. Everybody votes. There we go. All right. So I'm going to start making smelly, stinky cigars. And we're going to need a clinic and a fire station. Oh, several clinics, but we could start with one. I do not take any demands or orders from capitalists. Ugh. Nor Nazis. Okay, you lazy fuckers have finally transported the rum. He came back to see Tropico, which is incredibly based. Indeed. I live to serve. It would be fun to see me play. You know, people have been talking about that game. I've never played it. I guess I should. No, I'm not trading with fucking Nazis. Fuck off. I will help destroy you. Let's build a high school. We'll not do to have an island full of uneducated plebes. I just built one. Where were you like 2 minutes ago? Cigarette and Jerry, why don't you have any solidarity with your Baltic comrades? Can y'all hear the game? Just out of curiosity. Nah, you can't hear shit. Fuck. Hold up. Yeah, I'll figure it out. They want a cabaret. Of course they do. Sickos. Oh, 300 people are watching me play Tropico. You want buses? Okay, I'll give you buses that I can do. Baltics are just onion slop eating Hungarians who were elevated to sapience by the Soviet Union. I have zero respect for them. Their destiny is to be obliterated into nothing by Chinese Dongfeng missiles. Oh dear. Well, would the Chinese waste a Dongfeng missile on the Baltic, so? I wouldn't. I wouldn't waste a nuclear weapon on the Baltics. Just start churning out some lovely, lovely steel. It would be a bit of historical justice for the Chinese to start like colonizing Europe, though. Leave Africa alone. Just take over Europe. Give Europe a century of humiliation. They deserve it. No, give Europe several millennia of humiliation. I can make boats. I will not build prisons to put my people in. I don't know who Kaya Kalas is. Who is that? I do not know these weird European people. A big ass square with a big ass obelisk symbolizing something. What that something is, I don't know. She is a foreign affairs chief of the European Union. Well, yeah, just reading that bit without the Balkan commentary, I could tell that she is a thoroughly evil person. I do not follow that much European affairs. I am not a member of the New African Ministry for Relations with the Concord, so I have no reason to. Let's build another church. The people must have their religious indoctrination and brainwashing, after all. Plus, we can afford it. And she's a Zionist. Well, you mentioned that she is a high official in the Fourth Reich, so yeah, that goes without saying. There are no solid anti Zionists in the upper echelons of the Fourth Reich. I think cigarette enjoyer is just an American impersonating a Serb. Probably lives in fucking Iowa or somewhere. A bullet. All right, it's nap time. See y'all at 8 to learn about Nepal and why the people there are out in the streets. That's what happens when you ban Facebook, I guess. But until later, I'm Black Red Guard, and I love you all.